Hi, today we're going to make a wedding cake, but not one of those complicated wedding cakes with frosting and layers and tiers. This is a wedding cake from the island of Madeira, specifically the region of Santana. Santana is a beautiful town in the hills of Madeira, known for its like straw houses they have there and just their winemaking, and they have some great restaurants in that area. Try to put a link to probably my favorite restaurant in Madeira is on the backside of Santana, overlooking the cliffs of Madeira. Bolo de Noiva, or bride's cake. The tradition of this bread is that the bride and groom give it to the guests as a thank you gift. So it's something given from the bride and groom to the guests of the wedding. And it goes along with the tradition of the day of making the bed. This was usually a day before, a few days before a wedding. Bridal parties would show up at the couple's house and basically like booby trap their bed by putting things like clothespins in it, just messing with them, putting pictures in there, rice in there. And I did ask some of my relatives about this tradition about making the bed, and they definitely said even in their times they did it. They would use like straight pins, like the pins with have the little round ball at the end. Put a bunch of those in the bed, rose petals, sometimes little rocks. It was just kind of their way of pranking the new married couple. So when they went to their bedroom that night, all excited, they had to spend time fixing their bed, taking these pins out, taking the rocks out, and they probably just did it on the floor, right? But anyway, that was just a prank that they did back then. That's the tradition of it, as far as I could tell, as far as what my relatives told me. Another tradition of this bread was to cook it on a cabbage leaf. A lot of Madeiran breads were done that way because they would cook them in basically like pizza ovens. These are just like big concrete ovens where you would build a fire in the oven, and just like modern pizza day ovens you see at some of the fancy restaurants, after the oven heats up, they push the hot embers to a corner and they start cooking their pizzas. But in order to prevent ash and other, dirt from the wood from getting on the bread, they would cook this bread on a large collard green leaf, or in Portugal that's called couves. I have about 4 ounces of sweet potatoes or 100 grams of white sweet potato. Boil it for about 12 to 15 minutes until it's really soft, until you really could pierce it with a fork easily, because we're just going to mash this and incorporate it into the Bolo de Noiva. And again, this is a similar technique that's done with the most famous bread of Portugal, the bolo de coco, also has mashed sweet potato in there. This is a slightly sweet bread, and it is flavored with anise, and that's a very similar herb to, or seed to, fennel. They both have the same menthol flavor to them, but the anise seeds are a little more pungent than the fennel seeds. Now I am going to grate some fresh nutmeg. You also could just use ground nutmeg from the store. Okay, next I warmed up milk. I always like the milk really warm. It helps give the yeast a nice head start. Between about 105 and about 115 is what I go for. You definitely don't want to get above 130. Now I'll add a pinch of sugar to the milk mixture. That just gives the yeast something to feed on. 1 packet of yeast, which is equal to 2 1/4 teaspoons. If you have bulk. So while the yeast is rehydrating and coming alive, I'm going to add my sugar. Now you want to add 1 1/2 teaspoons of granulated salt. If you're using grams, usually salt is about 2% of the total weight of just the flour. So whatever your flour is, multiply that by 0.02 and you'll always know how much salt you need. So now I'll put in a teaspoon of ground up anise, my nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now I'm going to zest 1 lemon. And now it's only been about 5 minutes, but I could see some bubbles in the yeast, so I know it's active. And I'm going to mix the milk and potato together just to make a nice slurry that's going to distribute evenly throughout. Just want to make sure there's no chunks. At first I just put about a tablespoon of the milk yeast mixture, just checking to make sure it's a smooth paste. Now I'll incorporate my soft butter in there. Mix in the rest of the milk yeast mixture. And a lot of this part isn't a science. You basically You want to combine the ingredients thoroughly and mix it into the flour. So you could have just thrown it all in the flour and mixed it, but it wouldn't distribute as well as quickly. So now put the warm butter, potato, milk, yeast mixture in there. My preference for bread making is after I first mix in all the ingredients is let it rest for 5 minutes up to a half hour and kind of just letting the flour hydrate. The water is going to be getting into all the little flour granules. Let it do its thing and hydrate for a little bit. Then I'll come back, knead it some more for maybe like 5 minutes. Then it's going to go through bulk proofing. So it's going to proof until about double in size, which depending on the temperature of your house, it'll take anywhere probably from 2 hours to 4 hours. And it's always easier to slow bread down, so I always suggest giving yourself a couple hours more than you think. And if it's progressing too fast, which is rare, you always could throw it in the refrigerator or put it in a cool spot. My house right now is about ideal. It's about 75 degrees. But if it was wintertime, what I do is I turn on my oven and turn it into a proof box. So turn on my oven, I hear the flame kick in, let it go for about a minute. A lot of times I'll check the temperature. You want it to be about 85 to 95 degrees. So I'll put my little thermometer on the rack. And like I said, usually it's just a minute. I leave the oven on for a minute, then I turn off the oven. That's really important. And then it's a proof box. And again, most proof boxes are between like 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, the bread has been hydrating for about 10 minutes. Knead it for about 5. I'm actually going to make 2 of these, and I'll just shape it into a ball shape. So now we're going to do the second proofing. We did the bulk proofing. This is the second proofing after we shaped the dough. Okay, the bread's been proofing for about an hour and a half. And we're going to lay down some cleaves. You definitely don't need these nowadays, but that's the way they used to do it, again, because they used more like a pizza style oven back in those days, or collard greens. Then you'll put them in a 400 degree oven, and if you have an instant read digital thermometer, they'll be done when the interior is about 190 to 200 max you'd want to go. And the other thing I've seen some recipes do is just sprinkle a little bit of anise seeds over the top. So you want to bake them at 400 degrees Fahrenheit or about 205 degrees Celsius. Oh, these smell so great. The last step is after they've cooled off slightly for about 15 minutes, you want to brush them with melted butter. I'm going to cut into them so you can see the way the interior looks. The aroma is fabulous. Thanks for joining me. Now go cook for someone you love.